pause, you know. You don't keep them under control necessarily. What you do is you notice that you have something that is in discord, so you have an emotion about it, right? So you're responding, you're reacting to something emotionally. You pause and you don't say anything, because now you're in a place of the unknown,
Chaos.
right? You're in the place of the unknown, and so you have to wait until you can see what the next right thing is to do, and you can be really out of control, upset, and the best thing you can do for yourself right then is to breathe and wait and just try to keep it steady and figure out, listen and listen.
So it's negative emotion that people are talking about rather than emotion per se, because nobody's that worried about a sudden outburst of good humor.
Or joy.
So, right. So, although that can get you in trouble. But Carl Jung said emotion emerges where adaptation is weakest, and that's associated with the idea of chaos. And so if we're talking and you say something that disrupts the flow of conversation and causes an outbreak of emotion, that reveals some impediment or obstacle to our further communication, maybe with regard to the topic that we're discussing or with regard to our broader relationship. And the emotion is actually, it's an indicator of some element of the territory we both inhabit that hasn't been mapped properly. And so the emotion comes up as a warning, and it says, unknown thing happening, unknown and threatening thing happening. And then it's not necessarily much more specific than that. And then it can take a lot of work to figure out exactly what the problem is, right? But that's what you want to do, is you want to, and you don't want to jump to the conclusion, for example, that you're right and the other person is wrong, which would be highly convenient and easy for you. And you can understand why people would want to do that, because it's the least amount of effort. But the reason you shouldn't do that is because it's possible that you're the idiot. And then you might even ask, well, even if I am the idiot, if I can convince the other person that they're stupid and wrong, why shouldn't I do that? And the answer is, well, you might be an idiot with other people too, and with yourself. And so if you don't fix the problem, then you're going to fall into the same hole repeatedly. And what the negative emotion is actually an alarm system telling you that there's a hole, and that is a hole where chaos reigns, where things are happening that you don't understand or expect. So it's a prerequisite to further exploration. It's very common in hero mythology. One of the things you see is that the hero will be on a quest. And a quest is always for the thing that's valuable. And so we're always on a quest, because always, with every glance of our eye, we're on a quest. And it's very common in hero mythology, which I suppose represents the larger and more dramatic quests, that when the hero first encounters the dragon, let's say the monster, the giant, dragon is usually like an image of nature gone astray, and a giant is usually an image of culture gone astray. And so those are the two major quests, right? To confront and reconstitute pathological structures of adaptation, that's sort of the anti-patriarchy ethos, and then to confront nature and horror in its base form. So a gigantic dragon would have aspects of both of those. In any case, often when the hero sees the monster the first time, he'll turn tail and run. You see this in the Pinocchio story, for example, too. Pinocchio goes down into the depths to find God, essentially, the God that has died in the depths, in the most chaotic and dangerous possible place. And he's pretty resolute in his determination to do that in an attempt to transform. But when he actually confronts the whale in the depths, initially, it's like, hey, man, I'm out of here, And that's very common. And you see that very commonly when an emotion arises. It's the emotional rise, it's negative, it's anxious. And people's first reflex is to say, this isn't happening, to pretend that it's not necessary to delve into it. And then you might ask, well, why are people afraid to delve into it? And this is where you can learn to understand something like Dante's Inferno. So if we have an interpersonal issue, let's say it's come up a couple of times so that I can be sure it's there. It's not just some random fluctuation in your mood, or that you were hungry, or that I was hungry, you know, something trivial. It's happened a couple of times, so I know there's something there. Okay, well, neither of us are going to want to broach it particularly. And the reason for that is that as you delve into something like that, you go into the inferno. So Dante illustrated hell, 9 layers, with some terrible thing which was satanic at the bottom, right? Sort of evil itself. And if you take any issue that produces negative emotion, like an issue that actually exists, and you decompose it completely, you'll go all the way to the bottom, right? And part of the reason for that is that, like, anything threatening is reflective of threat and vulnerability itself, right? So it's like it's a single manifestation of something central, and a relatively trivial manifestation. Maybe there's many, but if you delve into it deeply enough, you'll come up against the problem per se. One of the things you find with people, if they have an interpersonal conflict and you delve deeply into it, you often find an act of betrayal at the bottom. Someone betrayed them at some point, and they have a memory of that, right? And you could think of that as a semi-trauma, depending on its depth, but they'll have a memory of that. And Dante put the betrayers at the bottom of hell. And the reason he did that was because human interactions that iterate across time are dependent on trust. And what someone who betrays you does is entice you to trust them. So they take your best instincts, because trust is a form of courage and it's a predicate for society. And then they turn it against you. Right. And so, right. So threat emerges, you get negative emotion. If you dig into it, you spiral down till you get to the bottom of things. And that's what people say. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Right. Yeah, well, Jesus, sometimes, man, that's a long way down. And people just can't stand it, you know, because they'll start talking to each other and they'll go down one rung at a time. And every time they go down, because they're getting closer to the ugly truth, more and more emotion emerges. And usually what will happen is people will cry, or they'll insult each other, or they'll further the fight, or they'll run out of words, and they just stop before they actually solve the problem. It takes a lot of fortitude to get to the bottom. So one more thing. Virgil guides Dante through the Inferno, and that's a kind of a reflection of the idea of the Holy Ghost. So the Holy Ghost, element of the Trinity, the Holy Ghost is the Spirit of truth. That's a good way of thinking about it. Scientists who observe their data sets properly are guided by the Spirit of truth. Otherwise, they just twist and bend the data to suit their career, for example. So imagine that you're oriented towards the truth. Okay, so now you have an aim. And that calibrates your emotions, and it calibrates your judgment. And so if you're trying to mediate an interpersonal dispute and you have the right goal in mind, so the right goal might be peaceful, continued, productive, generous, harmonious existence, right? Then your emotions will calibrate so you can tell when the conversation is deviating from that aim. And if you're forthright in your aim, you can use your judgment to descend down, and you can stay oriented while you're doing it.
Yeah, and plus it isn't so personal then, because you've decided that the aim is truth.